the best way to think about the brain in terms of mental health and functioning is how we start off life using most of our brain, the reptile part of our brain. You look down here, this little simple model, we use the yellow part, the limbic system, and below the limbic system, you call this whole subcortical system. That area some of those areas are fully mature when you come out the womb. The inferior colliculus and the cerebellum, certain parts of the cerebellum, they're already mature the moment you come out. But then, it needs the environment to mature the remaining parts. And the neocortex is just a bunch of cells in a cloud, striking out little pathways to each other, but hardly connected. So we start off, we're a subcortical creature. Subcortical creatures think everything's about themselves. They believe they are the cosmos. It's called relational thinking. And we see this in babies. Babies are relational thinking. And as you begin to acquire language, we go from relational thinking to object thinking. Where relational, where everything's about us, object, things are independent of us. We perceive things that we're not always part of everything that's going on. And so when we see the reptile part of our brain in charge, we get relational thinking. And we go from relational to this independent or autonomous thinking where things are separate from us. But we got to find a balance point. There's some good that can come from relational thinking because when we alter the world, we are changing the world. It is relating to us and we're relating to it. But we don't want to be everything's about us. What they say on the news, what's happening in the weather is not about us all the time, most of the time. What we hear around us most of the time is not about us. So if we overreact to it, and I usually like to use the analogy of a dog barking at a car honking. A car honks and the dog barks back thinking it's about him. That was relational thinking. No, the car honked probably for another car, but the dog nearby thinks it's about him. You see this all the time, walking up to a dog. When you're walking, like I was walking to the elevator and the dog was queuing on me. I'm not even going to him. I'm heading to the elevator, but he's in that relational thinking mode. Okay, so we want to get that balance point between relational and independent thinking. Now, a quick little summary of the clinical bands. They've been around for almost 100 years. I think THETA was the last one to kick in the 40s. So they found alpha immediately. They found beta immediately. That's why it's the first and the second, alpha, beta. Then they came up with delta. They noticed the lower part of the slower rhythms were dealt with delta. And then they eventually separated delta out, the theta realm from the delta range. And then they eventually added gamma. And now there's actually, I think, 20 different Greek letters used for various things, kappa and lambda and so forth. But I'll give you the classic 5. So delta is actually really too much blood flow in the neocortex. But it's neocortical activity. When you see delta, without the sensory system kicking in, without the thalamocortical system organizing that activity. So delta, you can think of simply as decortication. If you cut off the brain, they've done like cat studies where they decorticate, and you can you'll get delta in the separated cortex. Okay, you see delta in sleep, slow wave sleep as well. Delta we show up in our maps is this pink excess. That's excessive delta. The delta is in this low range, 2 and 3 hertz. So we don't have the 1 hertz range because there's variance in amplifiers. And there's other reasons that we start looking at 2 and 3 is our delta range. But it goes up to about 3.5 if you went up to the rhythm rate for most. It says 4, but 4 in this nomenclature typically means, because we're talking about 1 second windows, this would be from 0 to 3.5, and then 4 to 8 or 4 to 7 would be 3.5 to the higher level. Okay, so here comes theta comes in. Now, theta's got 3 sources. Right now, 85% of neuroscience are freaking out. Like, what do you mean it has 3 sources? And they study specific sources. Well, generally, there are 3 sources of theta. There's the neocortical theta that's created by the thalamus, which is just really slow alpha. So when you get out, when alpha usually goes every 100 milliseconds is a pulse out, and when your eyes closed, well, if it takes 140 milliseconds, you're in the theta realm. Even 120 seconds. It takes 160 seconds, you're in the theta realm. So slow theta being created by the neocortex. Then there's the theta that sort of is the organizing information system or timing of the subcortex, such as the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, the amygdala, other systems. And they've actually done some nice studies where they did a PCA study or independent component analysis study where they looked at delta, theta, and alpha rhythms. They said, oh, there's one source to delta. That's decortication. That's the neocortex. It's separated from the thalamocortical system, from sensory processing. So delta has one source. Alpha has one source. That's thalamocortical. And theta, though, has at least two sources. That's what was determined from the ICA study from, I don't know, 10 years ago. And so in a way, I think theta has two or more sources, multiple sources created. The last one is the cingulate source. So we have neocortical. That's like the relaxed theta. Subcortical, it's the impulse, the primitive impulse theta. And the cingulate, I like to call the problem-solving theta. And we've actually learned through our own experience that we cannot train the cingulate theta, usually at FZ, the same way we train the other parts of the head. Okay, so you have theta comes from the three-layer subcortex, paleocortex, and like the hippocampus and so forth. And then you have it that comes from the more mature layers. Like I said, it's really neocortical alpha that's slower. It's slowed alpha, so it's neocortical, and it's coming from a 6-layer system. And then we have the alpha range. Now the alpha range is our group mindedness. It's our sensory processing that allows us to be group minded because we are social creatures. And how we see the alpha in our range is it's in this up in this end here and over to this part on this side. So here this person showing a deficit. Blue is a deficit, pink's excess. And then we go on to, we're going to talk about harmonics in other videos, but you go to the faster rhythms. And the faster rhythms are like it's your thalamocortical system doing that. It's buzzing too much. It's over firing. It's firing at least twice per unit time that normally would sample the world. So instead of sampling every 100 milliseconds, it's sampling every 50 milliseconds. It's representing oneself and the environment. It's literally representing the environment too much in how we look at it. But we're going to look at harmonics later. Okay, so when we do default network training, this is what a person will see. They will hear the volume change, and the volume change is actually our primary reinforcer. The visual change with the screen size is our secondary. So we have a primary reinforcer and a secondary reinforcer. And depending on what you're training, like this is unity training here, and we have Weimar training there, and magnitude training, that one is controlling the primary. And so here, unity is, we're trying to get probably decreasing unity between two sites. Two yellow sites in the map, and in the secondary is a theta inhibit showing here. And is it working? Let's see. Is theta compared to alpha? As you can see, theta is dropping down. Usually, a lot of neurotherapy is about reducing the amount of theta. We want to reduce it and convert it. Only let in, or the theta comes from the neocortex. We want to have like a bouncer in each brain area. Only let in the theta that's acting like mature, or it's a slow neocortical alpha. Only let in the theta that is not coming from the independent systems, but coming from the sensory processing system during the eyes closed condition. And when we're recording people. Okay, when you're a therapist, this is the screen you see. That was a screen. Previous screen was one if you were training someone with just one screen, such as yourself, or distant training. But here is one where the other screen is that shrinking and expanding video. That's what the therapist, the individual who's being trained sees. And again, the auditory is actually the more important one. The auditory, the sound will go up and down. The volume will go up and down, depending if they're in the reward criteria or not. If they're giving us what we want, the good habit, the quality of the video is 100%. Once they start giving us bad habits, the volume will go down to 20%, and the screen will shrink to half, as you were seeing there. This is an example of bibar training starting off. And you can see the information. A lot of these information to see this for quality assurance, make sure everything's working well, here, and also how things are changing. Learning curve right there. Okay, so here comes the cases. Okay, so this is an individual from a couple of years ago who had a lot of stress, I'd say acted depressed, or at least not kind of deflated, and OCD elements. And you can see from the spectral plots, the reddish, or kind of it's supposed to be red up here, but it looks kind of purpley. The red is the recording, the brain map we did right when it came in, before they started neurotherapy. And the blue is their one after 30 hours. Now, this individual eventually went to 60 hours. And this is like a mid-map, so we don't see the final point, but we see the point. And we didn't map at the end because there's no reason. The person's leaving. They're feeling so fine that I'm good. I'm done. They don't need another map. The map, if we were government-sponsored research, we would be able to, pay them so we get the third map, but we're not government sponsors. So you can see from the blue there the increase of alpha. That's the main thing we want. We want to get that activity between 7 and 14 up in the eyes closed. Again, it's in the eyes closed resting conditions. All about what you're doing. We're always doing the eyes closed resting or eyes open resting. And we want that up. And we want to get that delta down. Delta down is decortication. So you can see that's what happened here. We compare that now, comparing it to the normative, the healthy group. You can see pink is excessive. There's the delta. We want to get that decortication gone, and you can see it's reduced. He had a little deficit in alpha activity. It's pretty much, it's gone. It's gone right now. So that's all very good. But that's actually only this information is the activity we get from the EEG, thermocortical activity, and it is only a minor player you see in mental health. The major player is the maturation, how the brain responds to the stimuli that the thermocortical pulls in. And that we see through the theta unity. So here's his pre and his mid. Oh, I guess, yeah, he was the one I showed earlier. I thought he was the impulsive one. But no, this is the one, he was having issues up here. You can see we don't want yellow. That's what it was. Now, we worked on this afterwards. And that's why after 30 more hours, 60 hours total, that thing was probably green, but we don't have the map on that. But you can see the improvements. You can see almost everything's going green. A lightening of the blue, getting close to the green. Here is the back of the head. You can see that having a lot of distractibility, area 7 is distractibility. This is social anxiety and OCD. Starts back here at area 19. That's going on there. Improving. Not done, but we had more time. This is why we're taking this mid picture of the shot midway through the neurotherapy. Here's looking at the middle of the head. You can still see the auditory issues. We see it less. We don't want this area 6 deals with social boundaries. That one normalized. Recruitability got a little bit yellow. Sometimes we see that when we do neurofeedback and getting successful because the person kind of lets down their shields and they let themselves be recruited more by the world. And we usually have to improve it. It's kind of a weird side effect of neurotherapy, of default network training, I should say, not other forms. But DNT, we sometimes make the person feel like, oh, the world's all good again, so they become more recruitable. So we have to usually work a little on that to close those, get those more balanced, those how recruitable your personal boundaries are. How much recruitable you are, how strong your personal boundaries are. Okay, you can see now when you see deep blue, that's where your mind is all the time. And this sometimes when you see really deep blue, sometimes it can be a dissociative state where the area is not communicating. Blue is not communicating in essence with each other. They're like little feudal fiefdoms. So after 30, we've cleared all this. They're now communicating better. This is reduced shared activity. This is now the balance. You still got this anxiety marker, and that's what I remember we worked on. And again, after 30 hours more, completely gone. Not a problem, even though, most people might still have behavioral problems. He was completely calm and lost that OCD. That's one case. Now, that was someone who responded to stress through OCD. Now, a lot of people respond the other direction. They go expansive. They go impulsive. And one of the ways you see in the next video, I will go through a kid who is impulsive and how he was changed by neurofeedback.